Right, let's call this meeting to order. If you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And where did I put it? Where did I put it? Right here. Okay, we have some music to start the night. The high school band is going to play the national anthem. So actually, I should ask you to remain standing. It's going to be performed this evening by the Burlington High School Wind Ensemble. The Wind Ensemble is under the direction of Mr. Sean Bucksbaum and consists primarily of upperclassmen from the music department. Last month, the Wind Ensemble proudly represented the town of Burlington at various concert band festivals around Massachusetts, receiving a silver medal at the MICCA Concert Festival and a gold medal in first place in their division at the World Strides Heritage Festival. And then after the national anthem, the group will also perform the BHS alma mater titled On Burlington, which was written in 2017 and approved by the school committee as a new school song. Take it away. Thank you. That was wonderful. Now, think you folks can keep it up at the same level as this has been introduced? Okay. I'd like to thank Ken Gordon for showing up tonight. Poor Ken has better attendance than some of our town meeting members, and it's much appreciated. And Ken asked me to announce that on May 26th at 1 p.m., the Commonwealth will dedicate the bridge on Route 128 over Cambridge Street in memory of Lance Corporal Gregory McDonald, who was killed while serving his country in Iraq. The ceremony will be hosted by Ken Gordon, and it will be held at the Town Common May 26th at 1 o'clock. We have 5 young folks helping us out tonight with microphones, so thank you to Ethan Gear, Nolan Woods, Badr Hakim, Sean Gallagher, and Navya Garg. Thank you for your help tonight. Okay, now we have to welcome our new members here. So if the newly elected, like brand new members could stand up and just give us their name and precinct so we have a clue as to who you are. Don't worry, I will not remember your names. Starting here.
Wait for the mic.
Well, yeah, let's pass the mic around.
Darrell Interes, Precinct 6.
Kathleen Buckley, Precinct 5.
Brian Pupa, Precinct 3.
Brenda Rappaport, Precinct 1.
Tamara Maniscalco, Precinct 4.
Phyllis Neufeld, Precinct 5.
Kim Milne, Precinct 7.
Joe Calandrelli, Precinct 1.
Well, welcome. Don't sit down, though. Don't sit down. We need all the re-elected town meeting members to stand up because Amy has to swear you in.
Okay, if you can raise your right hand, all of those who were re-elected in April or elected in April. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as a town meeting member in accordance to the bylaws of the town and the laws of this Commonwealth. Congratulations.
Okay, now a few motions to get things started. The moderator would consider a motion to set our, that we will adjourn, when we adjourn, we will adjourn to May 15th at 7:30. There a second? All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, you have to stand. We haven't done that yet. That's the next thing. All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we'll do the one we should have done first. Moderator would consider a motion to waive the requirement to vote to stand to vote and allow us to vote by raising our hands. Then Harris second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I need to have another motion to appoint Frank Monaco as deputy moderator should I not be able to serve tonight for some reason? All in favor? You can just raise your hand now. There we go. All those opposed? Motion's carried. And I think that gets me through all the upfront noise. Which brings us to Article 1, reports of town officers and committees. Now, I know, Amy, you had something you wished to say.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just to remind you, a number of people have asked me, following up at a town meeting, what happens, and so what I decided to do was to inform you on the 3 articles that were passed at January town meeting, what the status with those 3 articles are. The zoning bylaw article number 2, adding the life science use section, that was approved by the Attorney General on Friday, May 10th, so that goes into effect as of the vote of town meeting in January. The second one is the general bylaw, Article 9, regarding the plastic bag ban. That also was approved by the Attorney General on May 10th. That was posted this morning. So that becomes effective today, May 13th, which, if you remember the article, it said that the ban would start 120 days after the Attorney General's approval and posting. So we were looking at that bag ban will go into effect on September 13th. Unfortunately, it's a Friday the 13th. The third one is the general bylaw, Article 10, that allows the moderator to do the call 2/3 for an apparent 2/3. That was approved by the Attorney General on April 5th, and that was posted on April 8th, so that goes into effect as of April 8th, which means at this town meeting, the moderator is allowed to call an obvious 2/3. Do remember, though, that you're also allowed, if there is an objection to that 2/3 vote, that one town meeting member can stand up and say that they would like to have a count, and then we would have to go to a counted vote. So that's the report from the actions of January town meeting. Just one other thing. There was also a warrant article a couple years ago that implemented or gave the town, a number of us departments, the ability to implement an electronic permitting system. And I'd like to just take a couple minutes to show you a clip from BCAT. We have now actually implemented phase 1 of that, which includes the building department and the zoning board of appeals. The people can now online submit permits and variances and have that workflow handled electronically. So I'd like to give you this overview.
For many years now, applying for a permit to build a new home or building, add an addition, make renovations, or really anything that had to be approved by a municipal government required a lot of paperwork and a lot of time. In an attempt to streamline the process, Burlington has created a new online permitting system that can be accessed through the Building Department or Zoning Board of Appeals sections of the town website.
It really is designed to streamline and kind of cut down the back and forth that people have to do if they are doing a building project. Anytime they start a project, there are required elements, things like building plans, contractors, insurance permits, all of those kinds of things are required as they're submitting. And then they can go online at any time and see where their project is. They're alerted as to when an inspector will be going out, so they know that they've need to have things ready. And after the final inspection, they will get all of their occupancy permits and everything electronically.
As well as making it easier for residents, contractors, and developers, the new system is also more convenient for Burlington employees, both in their offices and at sites, as shown by Senior Building Inspector John Luther, who took me out on an inspection and demonstrated how updates can be made in real time from the field.
Take my tablet out, and I click on my inspection. It's already scheduled in for me. So I begin my inspection. I look to make sure everything is done correctly. I complete my inspection. and I'll go in and add an attachment. So I'll upload a picture. Now I save that photo and it attaches to the permit. So now the contractor of the job just got an email saying that I'm here doing my inspection, and there's a picture of what I'm seeing.
This is a big improvement over the old ways of doing things.
It used to be I would have a blue piece of paper with me, and I'd make a note on it, and I'd go back to the office, input all the information into the computer, and the contractor would have to be here for me to sign his permit card. So now I electronically sign their permit card by doing all my tablet work. So now this way we just, we do it all electronically, and they get notified right away.
From a Burlington construction site, IMB News Director Rich Hosford.
So on behalf of the clerk's office and the Board of Appeals and the building department, I wanted to thank you and let you know what's being done with this. The next phase will be the planning department, which is very close to being implemented, and then we will continue to implement other departments for licensing as it comes available. Thank you.
And I believe, Mr. Moran, you have a 30-second update on the sidewalk committee for us?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Steve Moran from the Precinct 3 and also Chair of the Sidewalk Committee. We, over the last 6 to 8 months, have been talking with various departments in town, and we want to thank all those departments that have worked with us. We also completed a survey, and we're just wrapping up creating a recommendation and communicating the results back to the community. So in early June, we will complete that work, and we'll be able to submit a full report to town meeting in September, and we will hold a session to discuss the survey results in June. So keep your eyes and ears out for those announcements, and thanks so much for everyone who participated in the survey. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. There's a few articles that have been withdrawn. Article 2 has been withdrawn. Article 4, transfer from free cash to stabilization fund. Article 7-12 on the DPW storage shed. And Article 25 to fund the Burlington Police Command Officer's contract. Those articles have been withdrawn. Okay, so that brings us straight to Article 3, which is to fund the FY 2020 operating budget. Now, would the town administrator like to introduce this for us, please?
We have a PowerPoint, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you.
Or do you have the clicker?
Oh. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, I'm here to provide you with the budget overview before we review the budget, and thank you for having me here. I look forward to working with you, and I'll do my best to try not to bore you. I am an accountant by trade, though, so that may be difficult. What you see up on the screen right here is a flow chart. It sort of describes the entire budget process from start to finish. If you look where we are in the process right now, we're right around 4:30 in the afternoon at town meeting. But I want to point out to the body that this process actually started back in the fall in November with a guideline-setting meeting between members of the Board of Selectmen, members of the Ways and Means Committee, members of the school committee, and financial department heads. We get together and we sort of talk about where we think we can go with the budget for the upcoming year. So from that point on, we agree upon some general guidelines as to where we would like things to fall. And at that point in time, the review process starts. So if you're a department head that reports to the town administrator, we review that line item, budget line item by line item, and eventually present that to the Board of Selectmen. If it's the library, for example, they go through their budget with the library trustees. Board of Health goes through their budget with the elected Board of Health. So there's a department review of each budget. From that point on, I'd like to let you know that we work with Ways and Means subcommittees, and they're not on television, but I'll let you know that we pretty much meet with them almost every day during the budget season, one subcommittee or another. So there's a tremendous amount of time put in through the subcommittee process. Once the budgets have gone through the subcommittee process, the subcommittee brings those budgets to the full Ways and Means Committee, which, you would see that discussion on television. On a similar track, any of the capital articles that we're talking about here actually get two sets of eyes on them. The Ways and Means Subcommittee, Ways and Means Full Committee, and then the Capital Committee is also involved in that. So those get reviewed by two separate advisory boards to town meeting. So where we are in the process now is approximately in the bottom right-hand corner. We're bringing the budget to town meeting for review. From here, once you guys make your votes, we'll be able to work through the fall and eventually propose a tax rate to the Board of Selectmen and submit that tax rate to the state, and then that starts the process all over again. So I know we do have a few new members here. The town works on a July 1st through June 30th fiscal year, so we're actually voting on the upcoming fiscal year 2020, which starts on July 1st. Okay, the town's budget goals. I look at these as they're very similar every year, and they're sort of overriding principles that the town uses to guide its spending decisions. And I'm happy to say they've been in place and they've served the town well for many years. Out of the guidelines meeting, we came away with an overall budget increase of 3.5%. That is for operating budgets, and that is a blended rate between all departments in the school department together will come in at 3.5%. As part of the guideline discussion, we also determined that we'd like to see a tax levy increase of no more than 4.5%. And one of the goals, of course, every year is to maintain our level of services. I know it doesn't sound like much, but compared to most communities, it's very important how we're able to maintain our level of services, and we're not coming before you every year having to cut back on services because we don't have the funding for it. Another goal of the budget process here in Burlington is to avoid layoffs. We don't want to propose budget overrides to you, and the town has never had to pass an override in its history. Another goal, we try to avoid user fees as much as possible. Many communities do use user fees to recover the costs of many different services, but we've been hesitant to do that here in town. We prefer for residents to pay for their services through their tax bill, tax deductible with the IRS, et cetera. An overarching goal of what we try to do with the budget is to maintain our reserves at plus or minus 10% of our operating budget, and we are well within that range, so we have a very good set of reserves to protect us in a financial emergency. The final thing that came out during guidelines were a 3.5% operating, 4.5% levy, with one caveat, and that caveat would be that we needed to consider the school bus contract outside of the guidelines. It's a big ticket item. You'll be voting on that later on in the agenda, but it was a 5-year contract that was expiring, so we were expecting it to be very different from the contract we've been paying up until this point. So after the consideration of the school transportation, We were actually on target to meet operating budget guideline. We were at 3.5% blended with the school department, and the tax levy was balanced to 4.5%. Once we considered the school bus transportation contract, that modified the numbers a little bit. You can see that the overall blended operating is 3.9%, and the overall tax levy is 5.13%. So those are the numbers that we ended up with, and that's the budget that you'll be voting on this evening. Okay, just a simple pie chart here to just show you the different categories of expenditures. School department, largest category, overtook the accommodated accounts. Accommodated accounts is, I guess what you call them in private business, is your fixed accounts, but then there are accounts that they apply to everybody, but nobody individually. So health insurance, the town's debt service payment, general insurance, trash fees. Those are items that we took out of departmental budgets because they were very difficult to control, and in many cases they apply to every department, like health insurance. Every department has employees with health insurance. So those were broken out into a separate category. Similar chart. This will just sort of demonstrate for you where we get the revenue to fund our budget. I'd like to point out, and we'll be seeing it on several other slides, but 48% of our total budget is funded through commercial taxes, 29% through residential, and you can see that state aid has a very low impact for us here in Burlington. We don't get a lot of state aid as far as communities go, and we never have, so it's not really a factor to our budgeting process. Local receipts for us, that would be the category that would be motor vehicle excise, water, building permits, all the other revenues that the town collects comes under local receipts. And that has been a pretty good revenue source for the town. When the local economy is doing good, local receipts do very well. And you'll typically see that in a good free cash number. If our local receipts come in extremely well, we'll end up with a good free cash number. This chart here shows a history of the tax levy increases over the past several years. You can see we came in a little bit higher than the target for this year. And you can see what the previous tax levies have boiled down to in terms of an increase on the average single-family tax bill. So that's what's intended to be demonstrated with this chart here. Commercial tax rate, $27 last year. That puts us in the top 12% in the state in terms of commercial tax rate. That's very important to us because we are in competition with other communities for businesses, so it's something we do look at and we try to balance out when we're trying to figure out what the tax rate should be next year. The residential tax rate from last year, $10.48, very competitive with the rest of the state. We're in the bottom 12% tax rates for residential. This is something we hop on a lot here, but it's really unique to Burlington, and we think it's important for us to continue to bring it up time and time again. But the total value of a property in town is 61% residential and approximately 38% commercial. However, when we split the tax rate, that results in a total tax levy that's 38% residential and 62% commercial. So we sort of round that off, and we like to say 1/3 of the value is commercial, but it pays 2/3 of the tax levy. So that's a really unique thing about Burlington. If you looked at the average of the other communities in Massachusetts, there's only 18% of the tax levy picked up in average by businesses in other communities, and we're up to 62%. So we have a very large percentage of our budget is funded through commercial taxes. Another graph to illustrate the point. On the left side, you have residential versus commercial values, and on the right side, you can sort of show the progression of how much of the levy's getting picked up each year. You can see over the past several years, the value has maintained fairly consistent, and we're able to shift the same amount of burden over the past several years from the from the residents onto the commercial taxpayers. As I mentioned previously, state aid doesn't really do a lot for us. So when you hear about the state is increasing local aid to municipalities, it very rarely results in much additional funding for us. It's really insignificant. I know our legislators work very hard up at the State House, but a lot of the funding formulas work adversely against us. We're a very property-rich community, and property value factors into a lot of the formulas. And as a result of that, we typically don't get as much state aid as a similar community. Local receipts is a category that we do very well in. As I mentioned previously, this category of revenue includes your motor vehicle excise, water, building permits, hotel tax, meals tax. All those items come in and become part of local receipts. And that's been a fairly consistent part of our budget. So that's grown in conjunction with the budget and with the reliance on the tax levy to fund, at least 1/10 of our budget is funded through local receipts. Okay, new growth. New growth represents, everybody's familiar with Prop 2.5, which we get to increase our tax levy by 2.5% every year. But the other factor to Proposition 2.5 is new growth. And that would be, if I were to simplify it, new tax growth. So that's representative of new construction and renovation in the community and rebuilding that generated new tax dollars. That's the column on the left. So that generally shows what the investment activity into our town has been over the previous year. And you can see that it's fluctuated pretty widely. On the right-hand side, excess capacity. For those of you that don't know, Proposition 2.5 sets a limit on how much we can spend on taxes every year, issuing tax bills. And historically, Burlington has always taxed very far below what we're allowed to under Prop 2.5 voluntarily. So you can see excess capacity is how far below that state limit we are and how much we could have issued in taxes. So you can see we went from a low point of around 2010, we were down to 1.7 million below our Proposition 2.5 limit. And because we've had such a favorable local economy over the past several years, the excess taxing capacity is up to $11 million. So under the state rules, you could spend $11 million more tonight without an override or a vote or anything like that. So it's a very, very good reserve for the town, and I think that it shows that this body's shown a lot of restraint on spending over the years. We typically spend below our means, and that's worked out very well for us. But you can see it's very related to the economy. So if I went back to 2010, you could see where the trend wasn't going in a great direction. But since the economy turned around, we're back on track, and we're actually, I think that's the highest excess capacity we've ever had as a community. Is just a graph to illustrate the same two items. In closing, I just wanted to provide the body with these are your balances of your savings accounts in free cash going into tonight's meeting. We have available about $10.6 million. Stabilization fund is the town's rainy day account. Requires a 2/3 vote to get the money out of there. But we have about $9.2 million there. The sewer enterprise fund has about $3.5 million in it available to spend on sewer projects. And sewer inflow infiltration is a smaller fund that we use to repay some MWRA loans, and that's the balance of that. I wanted to take this opportunity, that's the last slide in the presentation, but I wanted to take this opportunity to really thank the Ways and Means Committee and the Capital Committee. They really are the heroes of this process. We're pretty sick of seeing them around this time of year, but I do want to thank them because they work awfully hard, and I hope that you take comfort knowing that there were 2 committees worth of very dedicated citizens that have already gone through all these items that you'll be presented with tonight. And Just the final thing I wanted to impress upon the body is within your packet, there is some comparative information that compares us to some other communities. I know that we'll have some difficult discussions on funding the budget and funding capital articles, but I think you'll find if you read that list that you'll be comforted to know that we're doing really well in terms of where we stand in comparison to our neighbors, and I hope that you at least take that into consideration as you review. I know that we'll have some challenging topics to discuss, but in general, the town's doing very well overall in Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sagarino. I'm not sure, but that might be the first time I've heard the town administrator get applause. Mr. Riggs, does Ways and Means have anything they'd like to add?
Thank you. Paul did a really good job of covering the whole cycle of the budget, and the Ways and Means Committee has been, participating through the entire cycle, starting back in November with the guideline meeting, and subsequently the approval of the accepting the guideline by the selectmen and the Ways and Means Committee. And we sort of get started in earnest from February to April, where we review every single budget that has already been proposed by the administration or any of the elected departments. The subcommittees look at individual line items in the budgets and look at them in detail, as Paul mentioned, process-wise. So we've reviewed, there's 25 plus department budgets. There are 20 plus accommodated accounts. And I think this time we have 60-something warrant articles. So the Ways and Means Committee goes to great lengths to make sure that everything is in order. We also have a 5-person school subcommittee that attends every school committee meeting. They spend countless hours in those meetings and separately meeting with the school department to, shine a bright light on the school budget. And raise questions and help facilitate improving the processes. So we have a very dedicated set of committees. All of that, I don't want to say we grind through it, but we have weekly meetings from February to April, a couple hours on Wednesday night. So maybe not the most fun thing, but it is pretty satisfying to realize that we actually see what's going on and we see how much sort of consideration gets given to spending money, and that there are pretty much good reasons for it. We look at broader trends a little bit, and so that all the spending is done in context. And ultimately, we recommend, the Ways and Means Committee recommends the items in warrant. So give attention and
Thank you, Mr. Riggs. Now, the way we deal with the operating budget is I will read the budget for each department. As I go through them, I'll read the department, the total number as approved by Ways and Means, percent change, and if someone wishes to discuss it further, please say hold, and we will hold that for later discussion. When we go through a list of all the departments, our town clerk will add up what the total is that we've not held, and we will vote on those non-held operating budgets. And then we will go back and take each of the held budgets individually. Does that make sense? Questions? Mr. Cormier.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Cormier, Precinct 6. Just a quick question, if I could, before we start off. I know Paul had given some of the numbers as far as free cash stabilization, but I always like to start off the meeting, this annual meeting, as far as, I apologize, I haven't tallied up everything, what we expect to actually spend out of that by the end of this meeting, and what would be that, what we're looking to keep in that, in those accounts as far as free cash and reserve, if you could. Thank you.
Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John, I believe if everything passed tonight, we would be carrying forward or not spending about $5 million of the free cash, and there is no stabilization fund requested for this evening, so that would remain intact.
Okay, on with the budget. Town meetings and reports, $15,908, 0.0% change, 900 Ways and Means vote. Legislative committees, $7,017, 0% change, Ways and Means 1300 vote. Town administration selectmen, $575,018, a negative 0.59%. Ways and Means 1201. Accounting, $367,361, a negative 0.37% change. Ways and Means vote 1300. Assessors, $410,993, a 1.21% increase. Ways and Means vote 10-0. Treasurer collector, $701,816, a decrease of 2.68%. Ways and Means vote 1300. Central administration, $16,919,931, an increase of 3.4%. Ways and Means vote 1300. Legal budget, is that a hold on central administration? Yeah. Legal budget, $202,000. No change from last year. Ways and Means vote 1210. Human resources, $158,329, a 0.55% increase. Ways and Means vote 1300. Management information systems, $628,204, an increase of 5.69%. Hold. Town clerk, $378,790, a decrease of 6.78%. Ways and Means 1300. Registrars of voters, $12,000, an increase of 46.34%. Ways and Means vote 1300. Conservation, $252,128, an increase of 1.52%. Ways and Means vote 1300. Planning Board, $344,941, a 3.8% increase. Ways and Means vote 1300. Board of Appeals, $13,731, no increase. Ways and Means vote 1300. Town Facilities, $95,943, an increase of 5.63%. Ways and Means vote of 1000. Police Department, $8,890,654, an increase of 0.12%. Ways and Means vote of 1000. Fire Department, $7,735,589, an increase of 1.91%. Ways and Means vote 901. Building Department, $670,494, a decrease of 1.79%. Ways and Means vote of 10-0-0. Sealer of Weights, $7,800, no increase. Ways and Means vote of 10-0-0. Emergency Management, $23,600. Ways and Means vote 9-0-1. Regional School Assessment, $2,447,971, an increase of 2%. No, I didn't, not on my list. It's next on my list. Do you want this, do you want the technicals, the regional school budget held? Well, let me get to it. Well, okay, local education, $65,702,739. $65,702,739, which is different from the budget book. $5.39%. Department of Public Works, $11,881,338, an increase of 2.48%. Ways and Means vote of 13-0-0. Board of Health, $626,042, an increase of 0.55%. Ways and Means vote of 12-0-0. Council on Aging, $391,529, an increase of 9.35%. Ways and Means vote of 13-0-0. Veteran Services, $244,097, an increase of 1.64%. Ways and Means vote of 10-0-0. Youth and Family Services, $463,614, an increase of 2.28%. Ways and Means vote 11-0-1. Disability Access, $932, a decrease of 60.32%. Ways and Means vote of 10-0-0. Public Library, $1,584,630, an increase of 4.02%. Ways and Means vote 12-0-1. Recreation, $1,814,028, an increase of 2.93%. I don't have the Ways and Means vote for that. 13-0-0? 13-0-0. Historical Commission, $9,855, a decrease of 1.99%. Ways and Means vote of 13-0-0. Okay, for the rest of these, I don't have the Ways and Means votes in front of me. But I know they were approved. Debt service, total debt service, $247. Actually, I have that one, 10-0 for the Ways and Means. There was a hold. Reserve Fund, $200,000, decrease of 33.33%. County Retirement, $9,987,317, an increase of 5.63%. Excuse me? Oh, all right, so you have a different number. Here we go, 9,987,317, an increase of 5.63%. I do have the Ways and Means vote of 1201. Negotiated settlements, $880,000, an increase of 3.53%. There was a hold. Stabilization, 0. Not much to vote on there. Local transport, $120,000, an increase of 140%. Capital improvements, $300,000, 0% increase. Now that should get us through the operating budget. Okay, the total for the non-held items is $48,365,692. Any discussion on that number? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Now let's go backwards. Pick up the held items. What was the first one? Central Administration. Now, who had a question on that? Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Matt Frost, Precinct 3. The part of this that I've had a problem with every year is the OPEB contribution, and we also have Article 5, which is a doubling down on the OPEB contribution, although an amount isn't specified. Siegel Consulting, the actuarial firm, did a study that indicated that this would help us fund our liability for health insurance for retirees and life insurance after they retired. And this liability, in spite of our doubling down on this and making contributions over the last 5 years or more, and in spite of a rising stock market, we've seen this unfunded liability continue to rise. As of June 30th, 2018, the liability had risen in the past year from 93 million to 97 million, and that's a present value. So it looks like there's something amiss here in terms of this actually reducing our unfunded OPEB liability, and I have a problem with that. Is there an explanation as to when we're actually going to start to see a decline in this unfunded liability? We keep donating all these, or contributing all these big amounts every year, and once they're contributed, the town loses all access to those funds. They have to be dedicated exclusively for servicing future OPEB benefits.
Mr. Curtin.
Mr. Moderator, Matt, can't exactly say when the liability is going to turn downward. It did go down from the first study that we had back in 2016. It was at that time 128 million and went down to 90 million.
May I interrupt briefly? It did that because there were changes in actuarial assumptions. That's the exclusive reason why that liability went
I
down.
don't think that's an
Yes, it is
exclusive
true.
reason.
It's true.
I disagree with you.
Take a look at it.
I
Take a
disagree
look
with
at
you,
it.
Matt.
The changes in the actuarial assumptions is what caused that liability to go down, not the funding.
That's your opinion.
It's a fact, Brian.
Well, I disagree, but to your point, your question is, when will it go down? We are funding it at 9.3% increase on an actuarial schedule that's supposed to be fully funded by the year 2045. So obviously it's in the budget this year again to fund it. I think that, the town has made some great leaps in reducing the contribution for future retirees from the 80% down to 70%. That should help a little bit. You have to remember, Matt, that we have additional people retiring every year. We're also hiring new employees. So that situation doesn't change. That obviously increases the liability to some effect, but by funding it, the quicker that we fund it, the less the liability will be in the future. We just signed the contract with Siegel again. We will have a new actuarial study, probably that we can maybe present to town meeting with the results in September. So that's what the current status is currently. We have over $8 million invested in that fund, in the OPEB trust fund with the State Retiree Pension Trust Fund. At this particular time, that's the balance, close to $8 million.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
I
Burton.
have a couple more questions, if that's all right, Mr. Moderator. Seeing that this liability really is not going down, you can see the annual report, page 77, the liability's gone up, okay, in spite of what Brian has just said. The town of Andover had the same problem, and their selectmen instituted a several solution approach to their problem of this growing OPEB liability, and that was adjusting the benefits. And I'm wondering if the selectmen in Burlington have given any consideration to that in addition to this funding program.
Mr. Sagarino, or somebody from the board?
Matt, there's nothing that you just mentioned is planned currently.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions on the, Mr. Cormier?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Cormier, Precinct 6. If I may, through the moderator, Paul, and I know I'm just regurgitating this over and over again every year. I was the one that sat in your office way back when we started this OPEB fund, and we discussed it because it was supposed to be a great idea in theory. When we discussed about some of the overriding issues driving these costs, the discussion was the only way to wind up driving these costs down was to approach it from the healthcare plan side. There was no other way to basically do this. As Mr. Frost had pointed out, we can play with all the numbers and try and back out a number that actually looks really nice to people. But the fact of the matter is the only way we're going to really start to drive some of this down is to start to look at the healthcare plans, be it retirees, current or otherwise. And that is, as Brian had pointed out, it went from 80-20 to 70-30. It's been sitting there for years. We still haven't looked at some of the other options on that. Other communities, they don't fund the retirees at 70-30, and I'm certainly not talking about pulling the rug out. We discussed this at an elected official issue as far as the health care plans were, and try to start to phase some of these out. There are all kinds of options available to us, and we never sit down and discuss it. It's the white elephant in the room, and I'm starting to get a little bit tired of it, to the point where I'm seriously considering about trying to set up a special referendum for the taxpayers to vote on it, because we certainly don't seem to be doing the job and looking out after the taxpayers' money. This is a huge liability, And everyone just wants to stick their fingers in their ears and stick their head in the sand as if it's not a problem. It's a huge problem. And all we wind up doing is just standing up saying, yep, it's great. Burlington's a great community. We got tons of money. And we just keep on dumping this cash in for a benefit that the private sector isn't afforded. I don't get a guarantee when I retire as far as my health care. That'll fluctuate all over the map. But somehow we don't have a problem spending the millions and millions and millions of dollars on this. And I'm starting to find it real repulsive. Every year we sit there and we look at this and everyone thinks, yep, let's do it. Let's throw another $1 million into the fund. And we don't hit the underlying problem.
Thank you, Mr. Cormier. Mr. Stam.
Two items, Mr. Moderator. Steve Stam, Precinct 4. First of all, the initial numbers that Matt talked about, can somebody clarify whether those were the total OPEB liability or whether it was the net liability when you consider what we have in our fund?
Steve, I think that any of the numbers discussed are the net liability, which takes into account the town's balances.
Okay, and you know, basically, for those of you that this is a new subject to, what we're doing is every year we increase the amount significantly that we're contributing to this fund. And so at some point, we're going to be at a point where we really can't afford to do this anymore. And some action, I agree, some action needs to be taken before we get to that point. Thank you.
Ms. Warren.
Chris Warren, Precinct 4. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have more of a procedural question. When we're looking at the increases from total raised 2019, does that mean budget 2019 or does that mean projected actual expenses 2019?
Mr. Sagarino, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Those are budgeted for 19, so the percentage is based upon budgeted versus budgeted.
I guess just as a further point, I would wonder whether at some point we could see projected actuals since we're just about 6 weeks away from the end of the fiscal year. There must be some idea about what the projected actuals are, and we'd be able to compare that to the upcoming budget. Thank you.
Further questions? Yes, Mr. Miller. Excuse me, not Mr. Miller. Sorry. Mr. Martin. I had the M right.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Scott Martin, Precinct 7. For those people who are new, this line item that we're discussing, this OPEB, every year as people retire, we are required to have money to cover their retirement benefits. The liability that we are talking about, if everybody, as people that have retired already and those people that are projected to retire, if we take that number and project out how much money we need to cover those liabilities, it comes up to this $97 million. Right now, the only way that we could pay that number in 2045 is if we raised our taxes. If we don't put this $713,000 in and we don't approve the money that's in a later article, we won't ever get to the $97 million, or as some of the other people have talked about, get to some lower number, whatever it is. If we did all kinds of things and lowered the $97 million to $50 million, we still have got to come up with $42 million. or else start increasing our taxes. Okay? To try and, an example, if you like buying your cars and paying cash for them, you don't one day go into the car dealership and say, I'm going to buy a car and it's going to be $50,000, and you write a check out of your checking account that has to cover all kinds of other things. You start saving your money 2 or 3 years in advance of knowing that you're going to buy a car in 2 or 3 years, so that at the end of 2 or 3 years, you've got some money to put down as a down payment. If you want to pay cash, you save a lot more money. What we're trying to do here is save a lot of money so that by the year 2045, we have all of the money that we need and we don't need to increase our taxes. The penalty would be on the people, the taxpayers of the town. We're trying to reduce that impact in the future. It's a very, very well thought out plan to eliminate a huge debt and tax increase that would happen in 2045 if we did not do what we're doing tonight. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Ms. Tarpey, Clement.
Hi, Terry Tappy, Clement, Precinct 6. Also, everybody, if you look on page 67, you'll all notice, too, that it specifically says this is a Mass General law that they're following to collect this money for the county retirement. It has to be done. Whether it's done now or whether it's done later, it still has to be done.
Thank you. Mr. Frost, you have something new to add?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd like to clarify something Scott said. This is only one fraction, maybe a third of the retirement benefits we're talking about. We're not talking about pension liability here, which is another issue, and we have a huge unfunded pension liability as well. We're talking about retiree benefits related to health care after retirement and some life insurance, okay? The fact is, as Scott mentioned, well, we want to prevent future tax increases. Well, if this liability keeps growing with this funding, and it keeps growing anyway, we're going to be paying higher taxes. The whole purpose of this program was to reduce the liability so that we could meet these obligations in the future when they came due. That's not happening, okay? The current plan in Burlington is to dump this entire responsibility onto the taxpayers. And our taxpayers, I would say 99% of them probably don't have a clue that they're going to be taking care of this down the road. Thank you.
Any further comments on this? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the central administration budget number of $16,919,931. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Our next held budget? MIS. Who has a question on MIS? Mr. Zabolotny?
Ernie Zabolotny, Precinct 5. In the course of our discussions with MIS staff on a number of their future budget requests, it became apparent to several of us that maybe we didn't understand what was taking place when we voted 6 years ago to start aggressively looking at computerized systems. I look at this number not as a big increase, but it's a harbinger of what might occur in the future, and it might be useful to the body if we have staff describe to us what they think may occur in both software requirements, staffing, and also hardware requirements in the future, as soon as next year.
You're asking them to see the future.
No, they have already told us that what they anticipate. Some of the system that is in place is going to be terminated this year, and they're going to have to start thinking now about what it's going to be, and I don't think that that's properly understood by the body.
Does it affect this budget?
It might.
Okay. Is there a question there that can be answered?
Mike, please.
Yes.
As you did in the meetings that we had before, could you describe what you anticipate in software and hardware requirements because of the end of the contract periods that we have for certain supports?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I wish I could tell you that, but we haven't really think about 2 years from now. But everybody over here knows that software and hardware have an age, and they go what is called end of life or end of support, and then we have to adjust to that. Otherwise, we would have to go to a paper mode. It's nothing that we can avoid. I don't know if I answered your question precisely, but that's all I can tell you right now.
What I look at it as potentially a trap that we have got ourselves involved in, that we are going to be experiencing rapidly increasing budgets to support the MIS system in the town over the next 10 years.
Sadly, I'm going to say this. IT seems to be the department that has to pay for everything. What I'm trying to tell you is that software that we acquire is not used necessarily by us. Like the one explained by Mrs. Warfield earlier, the permitting software is being used by 3 departments right now. All we do is manage, coordinate, if you want to put it that way. We just have to pay the bill. That's all it is. But it's not something that we use or that we want to cause an expense on.
Thank you. Let's move on. I'm sorry, Ernie, this really isn't a this year budget question. This is a question for future planning, which has other avenues to address. Right now, we are discussing this year's budget. Any further questions on MIS? All those in favor of $628,204? All those opposed? The motion is carried. Okay, local education. We'll let them get down. We'll let the school committee show up. Mrs. Angelo, yes. Well, I could if I were looking at that book. Sorry, Pat. This is 49, I have someone saying?
Page 49.
Page 49. Okay, you folks set to answer questions? All set? Okay, who had a question on the school budget? Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Every year we seem to see a school budget increase that exceeds most of the other budgets. And I don't know if I don't think our enrollment at the public schools is going up. I know enrollment at the Shawsheen has gone up dramatically, and yet we keep seeing 4 or 5% increases in the local education budget, and Shawsheen is able to triple Burlington's enrollment with a 2% increase. So it seems like we're just not getting all the bang for our buck that we should. Another point is the Union recently reported that the high school, commendably, was ranked 116th out of like 350 plus communities in Massachusetts. That's in the top third, which sounds terrific, but in the aggregate, Burlington's cost per pupil, as well as its compensation rates, et cetera, are probably in the top 3 or 5, if not the very top in the entire state. So there seems to be a real disconnect, and there has been for a number of years now, between the ranking of our schools, which are good, that's terrific, but it seems like we should be getting even a better ranking considering the resources we're spending. Does the school committee or the administration have an explanation for why there is that apparent disconnect every year? Thank you.
Dr. Conti.
Mr. Moderator, thank you. Mr. Frost, I'll try to break your question maybe into two. While our enrollment isn't necessarily climbing, I tried to provide student profile information to this body. I had provided it to the Ways and Means Subcommittee, and they found it very interesting, and they suggested that I share it with you. Our student population has been growing in diversity over the last, certainly the 10 years that I've been here. So from the information that I provided, you can see that we have over 50 languages spoken in the district. We have about 875 students whose first language is not English. We have to serve more students. So even in the new positions that we're asking today, we're not asking for classroom teachers. We're asking for an English language learning teacher. We're asking for a nurse. We're asking for an assistant principal at the middle school. We're asking for a guidance counselor at Fox Hill, and we're asking for an adjustment counselor at the high school. Those are all people who are providing supplemental services to students who need it. So we're seeing a higher percentage of students who need language support, and we're mandated to provide that support. We're also seeing a growing number of students who require social emotional learning and training and work on their social emotional skills. We're seeing more trauma in kids. We're seeing a high percentage of students who are coming from families impacted by the opioid crisis, and we're seeing the students who are resulting of that. And so where you're seeing our staffing grow is in the student services realm and in the language support realm. I think I also provided that we have about 14% of our students identified as disabled. And the state average, I believe, is around 17%. So I think we're doing a very good job trying to get to our students early in terms of identifying discrepancies. And again, learning disabilities are also something that we have to adjust. So Mr. Frost, it's just not the pure number of students in terms of enrollment. It's also the students that make up that enrollment. When we did our facilities look 2 years ago, I believe now, we did ask for a 10-year projection. You're seeing lots of real estate changes in the community of Burlington, and you're seeing the impact, we are seeing the impact of those real estate changes in the schools. And so I also provided a 10-year enrollment projection as part of your information packet as well. And again, the projection that they're looking for is 10% growth, and we're starting to see larger class sizes at the elementary level, and we're seeing, so we're going to be graduating classes of, say, roughly 250 or below, and we see incoming classes that are closer to 300 students coming up. So we're going to see the district population we're projecting grow about 10% in the next 8 years or so. So that's information that you have here. You mentioned Shawsheen. I think Shawsheen is one school, Mr. Frost. It's a little bit, it's a different challenge. I think they have a different sort of funding mechanism than we do. And the students aren't born at 14 or 15, so where they're getting, I know the students they're getting from Burlington are exceptional, and I like that our students have the choice of 2 high-quality high schools. The comment you made about rankings is a bit of a longer answer, and I think the ranking that you were mentioning was the U.S. News and World Report, and that report relies on a lot of standardized test information, and we don't actually, as a school system, actively participate in providing them with our standardized test figures. I think they must get them from somewhere. So, and the reason we don't do that is standardized test scores are most highly correlated to family income and parent education. So we're looking at other skills for our students and other measures of quality. And I can explain that why if, again, if we could plug something in, it might take a minute or two. Patrick, you want to just try to plug in? Amy, I'm sorry, this was the presentation that we didn't get to you, but I'll try to continue to explain it while Patrick plugs in. What? Yeah, the SEO presentation. And I just need to skip through some of those slides. Again, I wasn't prepared to do this particular presentation tonight, but we'll do that. But we're not looking for, or certainly I don't believe that test scores are a good measure. I will say that if we don't change anything, I believe our standardized test scores are going to be increasing in the coming years because if you look at the, if I look at the profile of students in terms of socioeconomic profile of students and families, we tend to be slightly losing our middle. So we're the housing stock that tends to be in the middle of town is being replaced with much more expensive housing stock. And what's going to happen is as we have higher family incomes, our standardized test scores will go up. So you're right there. So again, I'm sorry, I put, this is for a whole nother presentation, so some of it doesn't connect with this presentation, but from the World Economic Forum, the skills they're looking for in future employees and students, and again, the students that we're training to enter the economy, test taking is not one of them. So they're looking for, in 220, applying knowledge that students have to novel and complex situations, critical thinking, creativity. You all can read it. I don't need to read it to you. So, Mr. Frost, to answer your question, if the U.S. News and World Report ranked on these things, I think that we would do much better as a high school. We have a class of about 245. We had over 200 seniors on internships this spring. Those were 200 seniors working with local companies, with some of the folks in this room, getting practical experience, working with adults, learning those complex communication skills. That's what we're trying to prioritize. One other slide that I could, again, spend 4 nights on, and Mr. Moderator, I apologize. This is from Bureau of Labor Statistics. The colors mean something. The red and orange colors would mean less formal education. The blue and greenish colors mean more formal education. And it's really a square, you think. So on the left-hand side, they're the low-paid, least vulnerable jobs to automation. On the top left, best paid, least vulnerable jobs to automation. Again, right side, best paid, most vulnerable. Right side, low paid, most vulnerable. So what we're also trying to do is predict in our heads, because we're registering kindergartners right now, and the kindergartners we're registering are the class of 2032. So that's a ways ahead. That's a number that frightens me a little bit. And in working with one of our great local companies, Microsoft, a lot of the folks, what they're saying is they're not even sure the jobs that, a high percentage of the jobs that are even going to be available in 2030, 2040. the job market our kids are going to be going to. So we're really trying to make sure our kids have the skills to continue to learn. They're going to be changing careers. They're going to be changing job paths. Again, Mr. Moderator, all this is a bit outside of the financial conversation, but I think, Mr. Frost, it connects to your question, is the U.S. News and World Report relies heavily on SAT scores, which I think are going to eventually be obsolete, and a whole lot of other standardized test scores. We still do well. I want to do well on standardized test scores, but what I'm trying to tell you is that's not our focus. Our focus is trying to prepare our kids to be successful in an economy that's changing, and we're in a great place to do that because we're surrounded by fantastic companies. We're learning from those companies all the time, and we're asking them what they're looking for in their future employees, and we're trying to design our curricular experience to match what they're looking for. And again, I think the expanding internship program is something that is evidence of that. We were also one of 18 districts this year awarded a Innovation Pathways grant from the state, so top 18. And our innovation pathway is going to be in computer science. So we got, I think, a $50,000, $60,000 grant from the Department of Ed so that Burlington High School can be a model creating innovative pathways for students, because the state's also recognizing that it has to be more than just about standardized testing. So again, I appreciate your patience. I'm sorry that was a long-winded answer, but U.S. News and Report is not something that we're looking to be top of.
Thank you, Dr. Conte. I have a couple more questions related to the budget and the money. You mentioned as a possible reason for Burlington's rapid increases year in and year out in its operating budget could be ethnic diversity and maybe disabled students. And I'm just wondering if the school department has done any research on neighboring towns like Winchester, Bedford, Lexington. Are they experiencing the same rate of increase in their operating budgets? And are they any less diverse? Do they have fewer disabled students than we do?
We're seeing growing diversity across the state, which I think is a wonderful thing. All of my colleagues that I speak with are feeling the burden of increased costs in providing special education services and transportation for disabled students. So I would say that that's a growing burden on many communities. You mentioned two in particular, and I don't know a whole lot of specifics about those two. I do know both superintendents. I know Winchester did require an override this year to make their school budget work. I'm not sure about John and Bedford, but I could find out if you'd like that information. Again, the percentage of students that we have identified as disabled is favorable compared to the state average.
Okay, and then back to the money again. The percentage increase year in and year out for the Burlington school system is well over 4% generally, and it has been for many years. And I'm just wondering, how does that compare to Winchester, Bedford, Lexington, and other nearby communities that have good school systems? What are their budget increases? What are their operating budgets looking like in terms of their increases?
I don't know. But I'd also have to look at the services they provide as well in comparison to that. But I don't know what their percentage increases are.
Isn't that a worthwhile comparison to see how ours compare, whether ours are reasonable or not, or can we do a better job? Can we be more efficient?
I guess it would be certainly a worthwhile exercise, but we'd have to look at the program and services, class size, a lot of other factors that go into making that figure. So we could certainly look at it. If we want to do town-by-town comparisons, we could do some of those.
Thank you.
Ms. Hughes.
Down the bottom?
Okay, it's there. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Betsy Hughes, Precinct 7. First of all, just a clarification and then a question. You mentioned it's not the 64 million, it's 65 something. Could we have clarification what the number actually is versus what was published in the book, please?
$65,702,739.
And what percentage increase is that?
Oh, 563, I think I said.
539, okay. And could somebody explain why that difference from what was published? Because obviously something happened between when it was published and tonight, so I'd like to understand that.
Dr. Conti.
Mr. Moderator, thank you. As Mr. Sagarino, I think, presented in his opening remarks, the guideline conversation with the schools was on a 3.5% blended rate. And when we work within that blended rate, again, we initially came in at 3.75. The agreement also was we had a 5-year transportation contract ending. We couldn't predict what the increase of that transportation costs were. So the bid process and proposal was outside of that guideline. I think 2 weeks ago, we got the proposal process concluded. We got the increase for providing bus services for, we're asking this body to approve the next 5 years. And what happened to the number is the transportation costs were added to the operating and the accommodated account. The increase of the transportation was added to the operating and the accommodated account.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Scott Martin, Precinct 7. In the backup information, Dr. Conti, that you provided, the regular transportation increase busing was $310,392, and the at least I think that's what that's for. And then the increase for the special ed was $399,283. Can you please talk a little bit about why those numbers are so big? We're talking $1.5 million up to $2 million or something increase total from one year to the next.
I can't, I'm not sure the answer is why. I can just say we were concluding a 5-year transportation contract. We went out to bid for another 5-year transportation contract. We transport students through regular education, and we have 18 buses that we use for elementary, middle, and high school. And then we have transportation that's required for children with disabilities, and those transportation services, again, fall under the accommodated. So the $700,000 that, the $709,000 that, again, was just mentioned in terms of 310 increase in operating and 399,000 increase in accommodated were a part of the transportation bid process. And again, those are the increases that resulted from going out to bid for providing the transportation services that we provide. Bob can talk a little bit about the process if people would want to hear about the transportation process, but I just think it's important to stress that we looked at, to Mr. Frost's points, I think there were 30 transportation bids awarded in the last 2 years, and we were third lowest of the prices that we saw. So we felt like the bid was competitive in terms of the marketplace. Just costs have gone up in the 5 years since we last bid the transportation contract.
I got a new microphone. I have to remember to turn it on. Ms. Sickler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Eileen Sickler, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. I'm going to read this just because I won't go off script. The bus, and I'm speaking to the 700,000 incremental, which over a 5-year period, the total contract is going to be about 13 million. The bus bidding process is non-competitive, not just here, but across the state, and this lack of competition leads to higher prices. The expiration date of the current contract was no surprise. There was plenty of time for proper due diligence for this 5-year contract, which approximates about 13 million. For this size commitment, I would expect several measures that could include a poll from parents regarding bus ridership, or having parents register for a free bus pass. Both of those steps would provide the details that would help in possible rerouting bus routes, thereby reducing the current number of buses. Another option that could have been explored was a school bus routing software application, and that includes features such as a route optimization, scheduling, student information, and a parent portal. I don't usually agree with Mr. Gallagher, but I do in this case. At the recent Ways and Means meeting, Mr. Gallagher asked if we had considered buying our own buses or leasing buses. Well, the City of Worcester began leasing buses last year, and they're considering a self-operating model just because of the non-competitive marketplace. And lastly, we have financial personnel in Town Hall who were not used. They have gone through the bus procurement process several times. What we did do was hire a consultant who prepared an efficiency report, which included ridership information provided primarily by A&F, who is the vendor for who's looking for this contract renewal. So these are some of the reasons I'm voting no on this article. Not because of the large increase or the total contract value of approximately $13 million over 5 years, or the $700,000 increase for the first year, but because of the lack of analysis, alternatives, or use of in-house resources that should be part of any serious due diligence for this level of commitment. Thank you.
Mr. Stam.
Steve Stam, Precinct 4. I'm sorry, but I lost track of what audits were going on, what audits have been completed. Could you give a high-level summary of audit recommendations and how they were addressed in the budget?
Are you looking for like a Ways and Means vote?
I'm not sure who the audit report went to, but I'm sure that eventually any audit report went to the school committee. Or maybe it didn't. Did the school committee receive an audit report? Or the administration?
Mr. Stam, are you talking about the audit that was done under the Ways and Means Committee that was presented at the last town meeting?
Yes.
And so what is your question about it?
You know, if you took the recommendations out of those, how did they impact the budget?
So you're asking if the recommendations from that audit report have been implemented?
And what the action was, yes. What the budget changes were.
Mr. Stam, I'll do my best. I think we have 2 ongoing agreed to procedures with Powers and Sullivan, the town auditor, and they're both still in process. One was to look at revolving accounts, and we haven't received that final report yet. When we do, that'll be made public. We also had an early look at our procedures in the business office, and again, we haven't received feedback yet from Powers and Sullivan. They've been out to the district. They've completed their work in the district. We're waiting for those reports back. I think what we've done in the budget process is we've continued to recreate the budget in the format that you received this year. I think the improvement from this year to last year is you have year-to-year comparisons, which we said we would commit to, but the budget's been totally reformatted, and I hope that it's presented in a way that is more clear.
Mr. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Roger Bell, Precinct 6. Dr. Conti, I'm a little confused on the process here. We have Article 18, which is asking for approval, am I correct, to enter into a contract for the school committee on the busing. But you've already got it in the budget that we're going to approve before we even approve the fact that you're allowed to do the contract, are we putting the cart before the horse here? It just, something seems out of place if you're already asking for the money in the budget.
We don't have a contract with the vendor. We just went through the bid process, so we know what the costs will be. School committee is limited to a 3-year contract, so in order to have 5-year contract approval with the vendor, we need town meeting approval. So the warrant article about the contract is just for the length of the contract. We wanted to make sure that we included the cost of that contract in the operating budget.
So is that a 3-year based on your budget currently, and then you're looking to extend it with the approval of the contract?
No, I believe the RFP was written for a 5-year contract. It had escalators built in for years 2, 3, 4, and 5 at 1.5%. So the big hit for us was obviously going to be in year 1 because we had been in a 5-year contract. So again, I think that we're asking to town meeting to approve the 5-year contract because school committee is limited to 3. But the increases were part of the bid process moving forward. And again, the costs of year 1 of the transportation contract is reflected in the number in the operating budget.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. DiTucci.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dan DiTucci, Precinct 6. Dr. Conti, usually over the years, you have always been able to make the comment that 85% of the total operating budget is salaries. And obviously, we can't do it this year. I know there's been some changes in the budget, but is it 86.3%? Because that did go up 1.3%.
I think that's part of your budget packet, so 86% sounds correct. What is it? It's on page 13.
Oh, yeah, page 13, right?
Yeah, 86.3%, sir, yes.
So what would you say is the reason for so many years trying to maintain 15%, and now we're up to 86.3%? So if we look at the preceding page, is that increase driven by either support staff, administration, or teachers, or all of the 3?
The staff that we've added largely, again, in the time that I've been here, have been teachers, but they haven't been classroom teachers. So I would consider them student services. They've been English language support. They've been school psychologists, social workers, and special education teachers. So they've been to support students with specialized learning needs is where we've added. So if you were making the distinction between support staff and teachers, again, I was including the student support services. They also receive teacher salaries as well.
Where are we on administration salaries compared to last year? What percentage of the salary is administration this year compared to last year?
I'm not sure compared to last year. This year it's 11%.
Yeah, I see that right here, but I
Yeah.
just need to I need to find out why the percentage of payroll is, because that's not going to be good. I mean, that's not going to be good. What do we do when it gets to 87%? I mean, that's, I'm just, we have to, I know a lot of the contractual agreement with the teachers is one thing. I'm not 100% sure how the administrative salaries, I'm not sure if that's an interview process. I'm not sure if that's a cost of living. I just want to know why the percentage of the salaries is going up, and how much longer can we, continue with that? Do you think the administration salaries went up higher than last year? You have to have that figure.
I think administrative salaries went up. They tend to go up with the same cost of living increase that the teachers get as part of their contract negotiation.
Right, so I'm aware that the administration usually gets the same increase that the teachers get.
Yes.
Okay. So do you see this as being a problem going forward?
86% did not strike me as a problem. I guess if it continues to grow, the positions that we're adding are largely mandated for those services. So again, in this year's budget, we're adding an ELL teacher because of the ratios of students needing English language services. We're adding a nurse because of the state ratios in terms of nurses to number of students available. We're adding a guidance counselor at Fox Hill just because of the number of student needs, and Fox Hill has grown to be as large or slightly larger than Memorial. And we're adding an adjustment counselor at the high school because we need more counseling services there. So all of those positions would contribute to the 86%, but they're not necessarily classroom teachers. They're providing, making sure
Right.
that
I
all our
just-
students can
right.
access curriculum.
I think we have to be very, very cautious, and the school committee has to be very cautious, because the more money that we spend on salaries, the less amount of money we're going to have for other things, especially infrastructure needs, in order to maintain the schools. That's all.
Yes, sir.
Now, I've been remiss, since we are discussing in detail a department budget. I really should have asked for a recommendation from Ways and Means. Ways and Means vote, and if there's a recommendation.
Oh, yes. So Ways and Means discussed the transportation contract in depth, and we voted significantly to support it. This probably was 12-0-0 to support both the 10-2. All right, sorry, I didn't grab my, so it was, right, it was 10-2-0 to amend the overall school budget to include the transportation costs.
Thank you. Ms. Nash.
Mildred Nash, Precinct 3. For many, many years, I've been on the Beeline Committee, and over the years, and even as late, and late I think is the operative word, in January I talked with Dr. Conte and Mr. Kuna about the possibility of seeing if the Beeline and the school bus situations could not be explored, particularly in the light of my seeing day after day the buses go to the high school with virtually nobody on them. And I knew that they had sent this out for contract, but with other people bringing up these issues, I like the fact that we make sure kids get to school and they don't have to pay for it. But I am appalled that we are down to one bus with the Beeline, and it seems to me that if there were some coordination there, we might have quality improvement and cost reduction. And I'm curious as to why that never seems to come up, either through the experts we hire or our own internal experts, which is kind of a question, I guess.
So your question is, why haven't the schools talked with the Beeline? Dr. Conte, is that something you have an answer to?
Mr. Moderator, again, Ms. Nash, we did get your question, and we did reach out to talk to the Beeline. It's just, I don't think it's something that we can coordinate given the tightness of the schedules and the need that we have. But we did reach out and have a conversation with the town about the Beeline bus.
Mr. Sinesi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Adam Sinesi, Precinct 1. I'm curious if Ways and Means, if we could get a minority report from that number that was just given of 10-2-0 against the transportation.
Excuse me, Mr. Riggs. If you're going to give a minority report, could you also give a majority report?
Sure, I can lay out the issue, and we can actually ask some of the negative, anyway. So there was a lot of concern about the increase. There was a lot of concern about sort of the unexpectedness of it, though it was known in advance that the transportation contract was going to be quite a bit different than previous years. As you've heard, we've had a particularly favorable contract in the last few years. The concerns were, I think, as you've heard a couple of people suggest, were that we didn't do enough in the bidding process to get a lower rate. That other alternatives hadn't been considered, and that there wasn't time to go back and do it again. On the positive side, it is relative to other towns and other contracts. It is a very good contract. So the price is a good one for the market, and it maintains a level of service that has been provided to Burlington school students for quite a bit of, for many years. Phil was one of the dissenters. Can he provide his comments?
Mr. Gallagher.
Let me say that I'm entirely in support of the school department's budget. However, on this particular issue, this is essentially a no-bid contract. One bidder, and generally in general business, when you get one bid, you junk your specifications and you carve them up so that you get more than one bidder. We didn't do that. Secondly, the monitors have been taken out of the general budget and put into the school budget, into the transportation budget, which has resulted in a 37% increase in the transportation budget over this period of time. So we're looking at $12 million, in my idea, and I'm not an expert clearly on this issue, but for a $12 million budget, if we spend $2 million on budgets, we already have fleet, we already have fleet maintenance, $2 million for $100,000 a budget, a bus leaves us $10 million a year for us to run our own buses, which we can probably do for somewhere in the order of 7 or 8 million. I'm not sure, but it wasn't examined. The other thing is we could buy our own buses and then bid out the management of the buses, the drivers, etc. So a $12 million budget is ridiculous without further examination of the alternatives. Thank you.
Ms. Creedon. Up at the back, microphone.
Thank you, Diane Creedon, Precinct 6. Dr. Conti, can you please address the high school empty bus issue? This has come up a number of times, and if you could explain to us how the buses come about?
Just wait. It'll
Again,
come on.
through the moderator, Ms. Creedon, I'll do my best. I might need to ask Mr. Cunha to help me. So we have 18 buses. We need all 18 buses. We run them in basically 3 flights or 3 tiers. The first tier is the middle school. We need all 18 to get middle school students, all the middle school students to school and back. The next tier is 3 of the elementary schools, Fox Hill, Pine Glen, and Memorial. And then the last tier is 1 elementary school, Francis Wyman, and the high school. We looked at utilization for the elementary and for the middle school, and we need all 18 buses. The buses are highly utilized for those 2 groups. They're actually highly utilized for drop-off at Francis Wyman and the high school, and Bob can tell you the percentages of usage that we explored as part of this process. High school dismissal, there's lots of empty seats because many of our high school students are doing after-school activities and they're not taking the bus home. The way the bid works is we're paying for the bus for the day. So even if we eliminated the high school drop-off or reduced the number of buses for the high school drop-off, we don't believe there would be significant savings because we would still need the bus drivers all throughout the day. I just want to reiterate that and Bob can talk a little bit about the process, we encouraged more people to bid. We can't control who bids and who doesn't. The rates that we got were, again, highly favorable. So the cost per bus, I I know is very expensive. It's a increase over our last 5-year contract. The last 5-year contract was very favorable. The current price per bus is very, very favorable, given the bids that have all come in across the state. Again, I wish more people had responded to that. So we have a highly favorable bid. If transportation costs, if we need to look for alternatives, then we need to look at some other things, potentially length of school day, start and end times of schools, because we need to have so much time so the buses can complete a run and we can reuse the bus for other runs. Or we can potentially look at not providing transportation for every student. So the level of service we provide can be something that we look at as well and talk to parents about. But that would be the way to reduce costs. If we went back out to bid in the process, there's no guarantee we would get the same price. We could get a lower price, but we could also get a higher price. But I just want to stress, the price per bus that we have now, the rate that we got is highly favorable. I think it was 28th out of the 30 that were looked at in comparison over the last 2 years. Bob, do you want to add ridership?
Not to correct Dr. Contley, but...
You can't correct me.
Nope. Mr. Moderator? Again,
Mr.
Robert
Kuna.
Cuna from the school department, thank you. So, like Dr. Conti had mentioned, we actively seeked out 36 bus companies and solicited them to our bid. When we had our bidders meeting come in, only 5 companies showed up for the bidders meeting. When we had our final bid submittal date, 3 companies showed up to the meeting, but only 1 submitted a bid. I do agree we would like to see more, but the document that I have that has 42 Massachusetts bids that have been bid for transportation at public schools in the past 3 years shows that there is only 2 that actually beat us that was bid this year, and only 5 that beat us in the past 3 years. The reason that I believe that they beat us is that they're A, smaller districts, B, they're less tiers. So these are 1 and 2 tiers. Now, in some of the documents that show that there are 5-year bids for other schools, there are 3 towns that have a current bid that have 3 tiers, do have less students than us, but beat us by $8, $9 a year. Again, bid 3 years ago. But when we look at what the current going rate is right now, if you look at what we were paying last year for a bid that we got 5 years ago, we were paying $285 per day per bus. Last year, the going rate across the state of Massachusetts was roughly around $390.87 for the going rate for a day of bus service. In this bid, we're paying, if we sign this contract, we would be at $366. So $285 to $366 is our daily rate. The average was $390 last year, and that would go up to $409 this year. So we believe we're still $50 below the average with the price of a daily rate in buses. Again, I think Dr. Conti mentioned it and explained it very well. A lot of our high school students do not own their own cars. So there still is a majority of 1, 2, and possibly 3 grades, 9th, 10th, and 11th, that still need some form of transportation. Maybe they don't have older siblings or neighbors down the street that will pick them up that do take it in the morning. In the afternoon, though, again, we have lots of events. We have book clubs, we have music clubs, we have sporting events. And again, people aren't on the bus in the afternoon. I will admit, we have some buses that have 19 kids in the afternoon. On a 71 passenger bus, that looks empty. But it would cost us more money to substitute a 71 passenger bus in the afternoon to then pull up a 20 passenger bus just for that 1 hour when we've already paid the daily rate of a 71 passenger bus. So again, there probably are some things that could be done to make it efficient. Maybe they'll cost more money, maybe it may be cheaper over here. I think that we solicited a decent bid. We looked for having competition. We didn't get that. But I'm content with the price that we got, and I think it's a fair value. Thank you.
The question has been moved. This is not a debatable issue. All those in favor of moving the question? All those opposed? Could we get some help with count? Brian? Patrick, think you could give him a hand with the count, please? All set? All those in favor? All those opposed? How many? There being 68 in favor, 29 opposed. The motion is passed. Let's move on to the next held operating budget. Damn. Okay, let's try this again. All those in favor of the school operating budget as presented? All those opposed? Being a clear majority, the motion passes. Okay, can we go on to the next budget now? Thanks. Council on Aging. Page 58. Someone had a question. Mr. Stam.
Steve Stam, Precinct 4. I'd like an explanation for the increases in two items. One is the part-time salaries, and the other is the contracted services.
Marge McDonald, you're going to handle the questions?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The increase in part-time salaries is the outreach, one of the outreach workers. She right now is 19 hours through the town, and 9 of those are paid, she's 19 hours altogether. 9 hours paid through the town, 11 hours through the state, and we are increasing her hours so that it will be 24 hours through the town and 11 through the state. The contracted services is for the 3rd outreach worker. She is under a Cummings grant, which is going to, we're going to run out of money for that sometime during the year, about 8 months in. And that was to keep her going through the end of the next fiscal year until I can reapply for the Cummings grant, which was a 5-year grant.
Mr. Cormier.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Cormier, Precinct 6. Could you please explain to me why we're bumping someone up to 24 hours when you know that 20 hours is the max as far as added benefits, so now we're adding additional benefits to that position?
The increase in the senior population, the outreach workers are on overload as to their caseloads.
I understand that, but right now you said she's working 19 hours, 9 by the town, 11 by the state, correct?
Correct.
Now you're bumping her up to 24 hours with the town?
Correct.
And you couldn't keep them at 20? We've been fighting this issue for many, many years now, as far as trying to keep the staffing level to a position where you're not only increasing the staffing and the salary amount, but you're also adding benefits. And that's a huge cost to the town.
I realize that. I unfortunately can't keep the level of services for outreach with the hours that we are presently at.
Well, I would advise people to vote against this, please.
Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ms. McDonald, looking back over the years to 2017, your budget has increased like 8% plus on average every year. Do you have any statistics regarding our senior population here in Burlington that are partaking of the services in terms of its growth?
I do. I can tell you that last fall we had a 23% increase in the number of cases that the outreach workers were seeing.
For over what period of time was that?
It was I believe it was a half year,
Okay.
6 months.
What about for the last 3 years?
I don't know the number for the last 3 years, but it would be above that just because that one number. It increases every year.
It would be above what?
The 23%.
So what percentage increase on average per year in seniors taking advantage of the services of the Council on Aging?
For outreach services, it's
All the services.
all services. I honestly don't have a number for the whole for the entire service.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Any further questions on Council of Aging? Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Scott Martin. The part-time position that you're increasing from 19 to 24 hours, was there any consideration to hiring another part-time person so that the workload could actually be increased?
We actually hired somebody for 4 additional hours last year, and they only worked 1 day a week. Did not really work. We need someone who's consistently there for working with folks. I don't have anywhere to put another person. If we hired another person, they wouldn't have an office.
Further questions? Ms. Nash.
Mildred Nash, Precinct 3. In light of being told that we have increasing seniors, I feel it incumbent upon me to raise something which bears on the senior center and the fact that from the early part of November till January, the doors of the senior center were locked down, and this was done without the knowledge of most of the senior centers. One of my constituents and I went to 2 Board of Selectmen meetings, including bringing a petition signed by 90 seniors to get the door opened, and at the same time they locked the door, they removed 7 handicap parking places on the Murray Kelly side of the building. When we showed up at the 3rd Board of Selectmen's meeting with 6 town meeting members, 3 people from the ADA, and assorted interested people, we very quickly were told the door could be opened, and that happened, but they could not do anything about the handicap parking till spring. And when spring came and we were told everything was done, which was like a week ago when we got permanent spots put up, there were 3, not 7. And in fact, my constituent and I were just at a selectmen's meeting this evening where they know about it, but it seems to be that if we have an increase in parking needed by the seniors, it isn't good to put them in what I think the 80 people would say are illegal places on the Grandview side, so that the handicapped people have to walk across that very busy highway to get into the building. The Murray Kelly wing is where those handicap parking places were most needed and most used, and I think all 7 should be replaced, and for some reason it doesn't happen, and yet we're told we have more and more seniors. My feeling is the fewer and fewer seniors come when it's harder and harder to get into the building. Thank you.
Further questions? Ms. Angelo?
Pat Angelo, Precinct 5. I have a problem every time we get grant money and we get a person on, because I know, as sure as I'm standing here, that as soon as the grant money runs out, it means that this person now becomes irreplaceable, and we wind up with another person on the budget, and then all I think of these OPEB numbers keep going up. So when this grant money, if it doesn't come across, or when it runs out, will that be the end of that position?
Very likely. I will probably try to move some money around within the formula grant and lower the hours. But yeah, if I don't get grant money, I wasn't planning on going to the town for it.
Okay.
Anything else? Mr. Killalay.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tom Killalay, Precinct 6, and I'm a Ways and Means member. John, I would understand your frustration, but you know, we all understand that in society things change, and one of the things that's changing in Burlington is the age of our population, and the demands made on the Council on Aging are getting greater and greater, and so one would expect that their budget is going to increase accordingly, and the needs and the demands for their services. Many senior people in this town depend upon the Council on Aging and the services they provide for a day-to-day lifestyle. Not that it's our responsibility to provide that, but we do. And I too, and you and I have been both on Ways and Means and become frustrated with some of the comments, well, we're Burlington, we're fortunate. Well, this is one of the things that being a member of the town of Burlington that allows us in our fortunateness, if that's such a word, is that we do have a very good Council on Aging that provides excellent services to our seniors, of which I am one now, and you will be very shortly, so that you could, you know, utilizing their services is a wonderful thing. It's nice to go up there, and they have a couple of gyms, gym rooms, which are great, especially for me. I've had knee problems, and I've been going there and working out well, so I don't have to pay an exorbitant fee for that place down in Middlesex Ave, Turnpike, I should say. But so I would ask everybody to support this budget, because it's only fair to those people who have worked hard to make Burlington what it is. This is kind of a way of saying thank you to them, and I don't think it's too much to ask. I would ask you to support this. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Killalay. Anything further? Ms. Phillips.
Cindy Phillips, Precinct 2. What I would like to just remind people is the outreach worker is not bringing flowers and, you know, visiting to play Scrabble with people. They're visiting people because they're really in trouble. You know, they need help. They need mental health counseling. They need support. They need SNAP. They need fuel assistance. They need something to help them live better. And if they don't live better, then, you know, they're in deep trouble. We don't have the resources in this town to support many people with middle incomes. There's not a lot of housing available for people, so they need as much help as they can when they get older and they're in fixed income. So I really would support this role. Thank you.
Anything else from anyone? Seeing none, we'll put this to a vote. All those in favor of the Council on Aging budget as presented? All those opposed? The motion carries. Our next held budget, Youth and Family Services. Who had a question? Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Again, another operating unit that has had excessive percentage increases. The most recent year hasn't been particularly big, but prior years have been. The most important question I think I have on this is I've heard that this department provides services to non-residents of Burlington. And if so, I'd like to know what percentage of all those enjoying these services are non-residents of Burlington.
Mr. Moderator?
Please.
Christine Shrewin, Director of Youth and Family Services. We don't have any, the only circumstance in which we would have somebody who is a non-Burlington resident involved in services has to do with, there are two pieces actually. One is if somebody is in treatment, moves out of town, then there are transition sessions that happen for a period of like 10 weeks to connect them with resources in the community that they're going into. The other piece is that there are at times students at the high school who are out of town. There are issues going on that's connected with the school, and there are times that we may meet with students at the high school, but those are the only two circumstances where people outside of the community actually receive services from us.
Do you have any numbers in terms of, like, for instance, in 2020, how many non-Burlington people are going to be?
I want to say less than a handful. I can't give you the statistics for it. Like, so for example, we saw 385 residents, basically. Of that, there may have been a handful that were outside of the community.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Sickler.
Eileen Sickler, Precinct 4. So are any of these services reimbursable by health insurance companies?
They aren't. They are not at the present time. And the piece that Paul and I will be working on this year is to see what the cost would be. Probably the biggest factor is you need to have a medical director overseeing the agency, or the department. So as a result of that, what the costs are that are connected to that. And in addition to that, the third-party reimbursement billing piece that would happen, what the cost for that would be to do the cost ratio and see what the town would actually receive in.
All right, thank you. So you guys are going to be working on a cost-benefit analysis. Super,
Yes.
thank you.
Anything else? Seeing nothing, we'll put this question to a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion carries. Public Library. Who had a question? Mr. Stam.
Steve Stam, Precinct 4. Mr. Moderator, I have two questions that I'd like to understand here on the budget. One is the overtime, which has effectively doubled in the last 2-3 years. And the other is library materials, which has significantly increased over the same period.
Mr. Moderator? Michael Wick, Library Director. I'm sorry, what was that second line? It was the overtime and, I'm sorry? Materials. Okay, thank you. So the overtime expenditures, what we've seen in the past few years here is just a change in some of the days that we've been open. We were under budgeted by about 4 days when I came in and looked at the budget in my first year. And so that increased significantly. some of the overtime. And then what we have this year as well is just like an extra Sunday that we have. For the materials and supplies, the increase in that has been for us looking at furniture for the library. We have over 150,000 people who come into the building annually, and we really haven't had most of the furniture replaced since we opened the library in 1996. And so there's some furniture that is sorely in need of replacing, and so it's a smaller line that we have, so a change of $2,000. Actually, the change is only about $1,150, throws that off quite a bit.
Additional questions? Seeing none, we'll put the library budget to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, debt service, the next held item. Who had a question on debt service? Ms. Warren.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chris Herter, Warren, Precinct 4. I'm just trying to remember what the close to $500,000 increase is in the debt service. I guess it could be the human resources, the human resource building, rec, council on aging, but I'm not sure. I just wanted sort of a broad brush of what that increase is.
Mr. Sagarino, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As the body knows, we've been investing pretty substantially in our infrastructure over the past several years. That was part of a coordinated plan that we came up with probably close to 10 years ago to increase the amount of budget funds that we were putting forward to our infrastructure. But specifically to your question, over the past several years, the debt from the Human Services Building and 33 Center has come online, as well as the debt for Fire Station 2 has been issued as well. So that building we're anticipating to open within a month or so. But those are the three items that are impacting the debt currently.
Thank you.
Any additional questions on this? Seeing none, put the debt service to a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion carries. Negotiated settlements, $880,000. Who had a question? Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Scott Martin, Precinct 7. I have several questions. I don't even know where to begin. What contracts, I guess, are being negotiated?
Mr. Sagarino.
Just to clarify for the body, negotiated settlements is where we park all potential contract adjustments. You may have noticed as we were going through the budgets that many of the department budgets had very impressively low operating budget increases. The reason for that is we don't have any settled contracts for next year currently. So the raises for those contracts are parked in the negotiated settlements budget. We have a bunch of settled contracts for you later in this town meeting, and if you so approve those, the money gets transferred from negotiated settlements to the department budgets. But currently, as of the June 30th, all contracts are expired.
So this line item is used as a spot to transfer money that's going to get transferred from someplace else to transfer it into someplace to transfer it. So it's going from the left-hand pocket to the right-hand pocket to the backhand pocket and finally over to the department's budget.
Not quite as many pockets as that, but in order for us to show you a true budget increase, I mean, our percentage increase without any raises for next year would look great, but that's not a true and proper budget increase percentage. So in order for us to do that, we need to reflect the potential wage adjustments in this account And again, so that it's included in, the town side came in at approximately 3.25%. That includes all potential wages increases for next year due to union contracts and the A&P contract.
And what happens to the, if the negotiated, if for some reason the negotiators for the town do some wonderful negotiating and only increase the contracts that are going to be negotiated to something that is closer to inflation rate rather than 3 or 4% increases, what happens to all of the extra money that would be left over in this account? Does that go back somewhere? Does it get into?
It typically carries forward until the contracts for that year are settled. And then at that point in time, we can determine whether or not there's an excess or a surplus.
I think this is a side comment, I know why we do it. I understand the necessity for it. But I think that we're sending a message to the union negotiators that, hey, look, the town has got $880,000 sitting here. By God, let's go after it all. And I think it would be wiser, if, from our standpoint, if this money was sitting in some other account that could be used for a lot of other things, so that they don't know that we've got $880,000 sitting here for them to get 3 or 4% when the cost of living is 1%.
That's a fair point, but unfortunately, the law doesn't allow us a lot of creativity in this department. So. Mr. Riggs pointed out that we also use those funds if somebody retires and we owe them money, if a department can't afford it. If we owe them upon retirement, we have to take care of their vacation pay and the amounts that we owe them. So it takes care of the overage for the smaller departments that if somebody retires in the department, they can't possibly afford that payout.
Anything additional? Seeing no further questions, we'll put this to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? This negotiated settlement line item carries. Local transport, $120,000. Who had a question? Mr. Zabalotny.
Anything that increases 140% deserves some discussion. And involved in that discussion, probably just as in the school bus issue, the words Uber and Lyft might be taken into account for a discussion of why there is an increase of 140%.
Mr. Sanchez, nice to see you.
Mr. Moderator, good evening. So a few years ago, we actually were budgeting $145,000, and there was probably more than that 140% reduction because we went down to 50,000. And we've been utilizing all our funds that we had in that budget to actually pay for the last few years. If you recall last year, and you can look at the recordings from BCAT, we said that this year we're going to come up and offer you probably a solution, a plan, and whichever way it was going to be an increase in the budget. And the increase is due to the fact that it does cost over $150,000 a year to run the bus. Again, the fact that we were asking only from 50 the last couple of years is because we were using funds that we had within the Beeline revolving account, which it was fair to use those funds instead of asking town meeting for additional funds. So this year, after a long period of study that we talked about in the fall, as well as I believe in the January town meeting, and looking at a lot of alternatives, including services similar to Uber or Lyft, we've actually came into a point where those services actually cannot be funded because instead of 140% increase, we'll be looking at a lot more to be able to actually have a system like that. So what we are recommending town meeting this year is to fund the bus for one more year. It's unlikely that the system as we have it will survive. The ridership continues to decline, and we wanted to give our few riders the ability to have a year to look for a different means of transportation, because this type of service is not sustainable in town. So for this year, we're asking you to fund $120,000, which, utilizing 120 plus what we'll have in reserves will carry us for another year. Within the year, we will explore a couple of other alternatives, but there really aren't many that we can do that will save us money and provide a better service, unfortunately. And I'm just sort of quoting results of a study, which, by the way, we posted online if you want to see it, as well as if you attended any of the meetings that we had and public hearings that we had on it over the winter time. So again, this year all we're doing is asking for that so we can fully fund the one bus for 1 year. We're currently out to bid, so we don't know what the cost will be for the following year, but we're estimating an increase from the current about $150,000 that we're paying the vendor for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Any further questions? Mr. DiTucci.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dan DiTucci, Precinct 6. John, are we getting any reimbursement from the T?
Yes, Dan. We have. We're currently receiving about $40,000 from the MBTA. But when we try to budget for the following year, we never count on those funds coming in, because as you recall, like 5 years ago, they actually cut the entire funding for the year. So when we do our budgeting, we always assume that those funds may not be coming in. But yes, we're getting about $40,000.
So the 120 could be 80,000. Or we're gonna vote on 120, and what happens if we get the reimbursement that we normally get? Then what do we do?
The additional funds will remain with the town, so it's not something that we are able to utilize for anything else.
Okay, but then keeping in mind what you said, this may be the last year. So we don't want to have any type of we don't need to have money in this fund going forward anymore.
And that's correct. If there is not a transit system in Burlington any longer, so those funds will be closed out. There will be no need to keep the fund open, it'll go into, will it be free cash? It'll go into free cash.
And we'll probably know all this again next year.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Nash.
Mildred Nash, Precinct 3. At one point, between the last Maytown meeting and now, I think it was in the fall, there was a meeting at Grandview Farm of regional transportation gurus, for lack of a better name, and they were talking about Bedford, Lexington, and Burlington coming up with some, I'm not sure if I'm including everybody, but I feel that the Beeline is sort of the poor relative of the school bus contract, where we have paid so little that we're down to one bus, and then we're surprised because only the totally desperate in need of transportation can take a bus that has so few routes that it sometimes takes you 3 hours to get where you're going. I think this is sad. I think it may be the inevitable end, but my question is there any sign that you know of, because I haven't heard a word since then, on Burlington becoming part of a regional system so that you could at least get to maybe the main spots, including other towns?
Mr. Sanchez.
Yeah, Mr. Moderator, when the recommendation from the consultant on the study that you're talking about was to, yes, combine our resources with both Lexington and Bedford to improve our system, and that also required a minimum commitment of the 3 towns of $800,000 to set up the contract, which the 3 towns together do not spend that kind of money right now, so it's not a feasible solution for the communities. It did involve, I mean, again, we have it posted online, it involved rerouting some of our systems, actually reducing a lot of the areas where we currently go to with our bus, and just concentrating on one route, which is the one that has the largest ridership. But in both looking at the cost and the fact that we're not going to be servicing the entire town is just not a solution that Burlington was willing to pursue, neither the other two towns. So unfortunately, that's where we stand right now.
Yes, Mayor, and Ms. Altman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Myrna Saltman, Precinct 2. It seems like every year I get up to speak in favor of keeping the Beeline bus going. As I look around this wonderful gathering here tonight, most of you don't realize that the two biggest challenges as we get older, and we had Marge McDonald telling you how the population is aging in town, the two biggest challenges as you get older are transportation and housing. And if we do away with this Beeline bus, we are eliminating one important source of transportation that I rave about. My wonderful town of Burlington, when I teach classes on aging, that we have this utility available to us. And when we talk about housing, we're not doing anything in this town for housing for older people. So it's time for town meeting to wake up and think about the people who are really aging in this town and seeing that you provide the services that we really need. Thank you.
Anything additional? Seeing nothing, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Beeline budget passes. And that completes the operating budget. Congratulations. You have successfully spent $141 million. It's not bad for 2.5 hours work. But thanks to a lot of other people who put us in a position to be able to do that. Okay. Article 4 has been withdrawn. Article 5, transfer from free cash to the OPEB trust fund. It is hereby requested that Article 5 be moved as follows to see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $500,000 to place in the town's OPEB trust fund. We've already heard a lot about the OPEB trust fund. Are there any additional comments? Mr. Frost, you have something new that we haven't heard before? You wouldn't lie to me, would you?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. When we were discussing the central administration budget, Paul, we were talking about OPEB a lot, as Bill said, and you mentioned in that discussion Siegel has come out with a new actuarial report. Is that right?
No, it's in process. It'll be done as of 12/31/18, I believe. So that new study is required every 2 years, and the schedule is as of 12/31/18. So that project is in process.
Okay. Now, this additional $500,000 on top of central administration's contribution, is that in line with the current Siegel funding schedule, or is that in addition to the Siegel funding schedule?
In addition to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I've been remiss. Ways and Means, vote and recommendation on this article.
Ways and Means voted 11-0-0 in favor.
Any questions? Further discussion on this article? Seeing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That the motion carries. Article 6 is to fund revolving accounts. It is hereby requested that Article 6 be moved as it is printed in the warrant. Are any questions on revolving accounts? Mr. Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Scott Martin, Precinct 7. For the new people, if they don't understand, could we have somebody explain what the revolving accounts are used for and why they're here?
Yes, we could probably do that. That's a good idea. Mr. Sagarino?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. A revolving fund is a fund that is set up where we collect a fee and we use that fee to reinvest in a particular program. So there's typically a correlation between the fee charged and the service provided. And the way a revolving fund works, if you go into the town bylaws, you'll see a whole section that describes what each one of these revolving funds are, who's authorized to spend, what the money in is, what the money out is. And after the law changed a couple years ago, all town meeting is being asked to do here is to set an upward expenditure limit. So as the money is collected from the fees, we can spend it out on that program without further action from town meeting. So the amounts that you're voting here set an upward total as to how much we can spend from each of these funds in the upcoming year.
Questions on revolving accounts? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Article 7, capital budget items. We will take these individually. Article 7.1 is MIS, financial software modules, requested by the selectmen for $68,000. Mr. Sagarino?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. These financial modules, this is a continuation of the town's ISAC committee. You may recall several years ago, the ISAC committee made a presentation to the town on the state of the town's computer systems. And one of the key recommendations was to utilize more fully the town's existing financial software, the Munis software system. So this capital request is for a couple of modules related to the Treasurer's Office, and it's a continuation of the project that was initiated by the ISAC committee, and we just continue to move on, and we're trying to utilize more of the system that we can. So that's what these costs are.
Mr. Riggs, Ways and Means vote? And recommendation?
Ways and Means voted 12-0-0 in favor.
Further questions? Mr. Cormier?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Cormier, Precinct 6. If I could, the committee, is that still in existence? Do they meet on a regular basis? And because I don't recall hearing from them more lately. And in discussion earlier, as far as a lot of the changes, you know, within year to year and how quickly everything kind of turns on a dime with some of the IT stuff. Are they still meeting?
I don't believe that they've still met since they presented that report to town meeting, but I think later on in the town meeting agenda, you'll see a warrant article regarding reigniting the ISAC committee to consider the town's cybersecurity. So they are still out there. They haven't been meeting actively, I don't believe.
Okay, thank you. It'd be nice to kind of regenerate that, you know, because things are changing the way they are, and kind of have updates from time to time to make sure that we're still on the right path. Thank you.
Additional questions on this article? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. Oh, there is one. Where is it? Oh, Ms. Prendergast.
Rochelle Prendergast, Precinct 5. Is this financial software part of the recommendation from the audit for the school budget?
No, it is not related to anything related to the school audit.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Sinesi.
Adam Sinesi, Precinct 1. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It is worth mentioning the capital budget voted 6-0-0 on this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Sinesi. I'll get it back in the rhythm of these Ways and Means, capital budget. Okay. Anything further on this article, excuse me? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of Article 7.1? All those opposed? Motion carries. Article 7.2, it's for website redesign from the town clerk for $40,000. Ms. Warfield, do you want to speak on your article? Ways and Means have a recommendation?
Ways and Means voted 12-0-0 in favor.
Capital budget vote on this one? 6-0. Please use the microphone.
Actually, I should correct. Ways and Means vote was 11-0-1, one abstention.
We voted, capital budget voted 6-0-0.
Thank you. Questions on this? Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It seems that every few years we get a request from this department for this kind of money, tens of thousands of dollars for web redesign. Amy, do you have a schedule of the last 5 years, how much we've spent on web redesigns?
Sure. The last big request, the redesign or the design of a website was done in 2012, and that was $12,000. There was a minor redesign done in 2016, which was $7,000. We're now at a point where what we need to do is a full redesign, and there's mainly 4 areas that really have to be reworked, and it has to do with the technology changes and the use of how people come to our website. The first one deals with mobile support. As you can see in the backup, almost 40% of our use right now with the website through analytics is done from mobile devices. So people on their phone or on their tablet coming to the web. The second thing is second area is online use. People paying bills, ordering vital records from the clerk's office, looking for particular things, or even with the new electronic permitting system, although that's been up for about 3.5 weeks, the building department has already booked $15,000 worth of work through that. The third area is dealing with social media tools. Again, people are on their phones or on a tablet and need to get to the web. And then the fourth area is, again, being the keeper of the records, one of my hot areas in terms of greater document online management so people can find things easier. This is one of the major requests or major functions right now that I'm spending my time with. And so these 4 areas are kind of the place that we need to really work with the website. The reason I put in for that amount has to deal with, although we haven't gone out to an RFP yet, but talking to other communities and what they've done recently with their websites, this seems to be, like I've said in my backup, the range is between about $33,000 and about $40,000 to get our website up to the level we need to have it at.
Okay, thank you. Would we be using the same vendors as in the past?
We may or we may not. We're going to put out to a number of vendors. There is another
One of the biggest changes that has happened in this area is that one of the major vendors that a lot of towns were using was a company called Virtual Town Hall and Schools. They got purchased by a big-time vendor that we looked at actually in 2012 and chose not to go with them, but we will put it out to them as well as our current vendor and a couple other local vendors. So we're going to just put out an RFP and see where they're at.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Slansky. Oh, excuse me, not Mr. Slansky. It's the other one, Nolan. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Nolan Glantz, Precinct 1. I do want to extend my due apologies to Rob Schlansky. Amy, if you could clarify, is this just for design work or for the actual implementation or both? It wasn't quite clear.
This is for the whole, the technology and the design work, the whole redo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else whose name I can get wrong? Ms. O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Patricia O'Brien, Precinct 2. Amy, can you tell me, does a vendor guarantee like captioning and voiceovers so that the website is accessible to everyone?
I'm sorry? The question about handicap
accessibility, so things like closed captioning and voiceovers and things like that.
Yeah, that is another component that our current site is lacking with, is ADA compliance. And so that would be another big component piece of what everybody's putting into a design right now as well. Thank you for bringing that up.
Mr. Zabolotny.
This article was the reason that I previously somewhat ineptly tried to get the people from MIS to explain how pervasive the MIS system is in all departments. And I don't think we know just exactly how much we are becoming a fully integrated member of the internet. And I thought it would be very useful to the body to have a better appreciation for just how much the computer systems have invaded all of our department work.
Anything additional? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Articles carries. Article 7.4, from the Fire Department, Fire and EMS computer-aided dispatch. You catching me again? Okay, excuse me. I'm skipping over the police. 7.3, police, door security and cell camera upgrades. Under the selectmen, $32,279. Is there a vote from the selectmen? Mr. Tigas?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Selectmen voted in favor 5-0-0.
Thank you. Ways and Means?
Ways and Means voted 12-0-1.
Capital Budget?
6-0.
Thank you. Questions on this? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now we'll try 7.4. From Fire Department, Fire and EMS computer-aided dispatch. Under the selectmen, $22,753. Is there a vote from the selectmen? Oh, Mr. Priest, and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, the selectmen voted in favor 4-0-1.
Thank you. Ways and Means?
Ways and Means voted 12-0-1.
Capital Budget? Try it again, please.
Again.
What? Oh, capital budget voted 6-0-0.
Thank you. Questions on this article? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Seven five, fire, security camera replacement at headquarters under the selectmen, $15,296. A vote from the selectmen?
Selectman vote was 401.
Thank you. Ways and Means?
Ways and Means voted 1201 in favor.
Thank you. Capital budget?
Capital budget voted 6-0, and this is another example of how MIS gets into the system.
Questions on this article? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 7-6, DPW, Mill Pond Finish Water and Effluent Repair. Under the Selectmen, $42,000. Vote of the Selectmen. Mr. Hogan?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We voted 5-0-0.
Thank you. Ways and Means?
Ways and Means voted 10-0-0 in
Thank
favor.
you. Capital budget?
Capital budget voted 7-0-0.
Thank you. Questions on this article? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Article 7-7, DPW, Vinebrook Filter Repair. Under the Selectmen, $80,000. Vote of the Selectmen?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Selectmen voted 5-0-0 in favor of this article.
Thank you, Mr. Runyon. Ways and Means?
Ways and Means voted 11-0-0 in favor.
Capital budget?
Capital budget voted 7-0-0.
Thank you. Questions from the body? Seeing none, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 7-8, DPW, culvert and stream cleaning and drainage repairs. Under the Selectmen, $200,000. Vote of the Selectmen, please. Mr. Tigas.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Selectmen voted in favor 5-0-0.
Thank you. Ways and Means?
Ways and Means voted 10-0-0.
Thank you. Capital budget?
Capital budget voted 7-0-0 with the caveat that we think that that's an operating cost item and should be in the operating budget, which is an annual recommendation, by the way.
Questions on this article? Yes, Mr. Wells Bean.
I'm wondering if there's any way to do preventative work. I've seen some posts online about runoff from construction sites and that sort of thing. So I don't know if there's any way to prevent some of these costs.
Mr. Sanchez, maybe? Can you can you stop putting sand on the roads,
Yeah,
please?
so actually, I was going to speak on what we do. For sediments coming from any of the construction sites, I mean, there's already bylaws in place that take care of that by several departments in the town. As far as what we used to do for snow and ice, we used to use a lot of sand. Unfortunately, for many, many decades, we used sand in the wintertime, and that sand and silt has been accumulated in the brooks, and that's what we're still removing now. So it's not so much particular construction activities, but left over from years and years of sand in the streets.
Thank you. Mrs. Damiani.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Lucy Damiani, Precinct 3. Is this an appropriate time to ask what sections of the streams will be, what areas will be cleaned this year?
Mr.
And
Sanchez.
What was accomplished?
Yeah, Mr. Tom Hayes is going to.
Mr. Hayes.
Mr. Moderator, this season we're doing a stream off of Cedar, between Cedar and Easton Ave. And then there's another small tributary, I believe it's off of Foster or Luther. We're also cleaning a small channel over there.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, let's vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Article 7-9 under the DPW Vehicle Replacement Program. Spending authority, the Selectmen, $480,250. Vote of the Selectmen.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Vote of the Selectmen was 5-0-0 in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Priest. Ways and Means.
Ways and Means voted 10-0-0 in favor.
Thank you. Capital Budget.
Capital Budget voted 7-0-0. We also like to point out that the program seems to be working very well because of the interchange of scheduled vehicle changes. Some are delayed, some are rushed up. I think the program is working quite well.
Thank you. Questions from the body? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 7-10 in the DPW Department, library roof repair. Under the Selectmen, $220,000. Vote of the Selectmen. Mr. Hogan.
Ooh, excuse me, Mr. Moderator. We voted 5-0-0 in favor.
Thank you. Ways and Means?
Ways and Means voted 11-0-0 to fix a roof that's in disrepair and has been leaking.
Thank you. Capital Budget.
Capital Budget voted 7-0-0.
Questions from the body? Mr. Boyven.
Just one question. Bill Boyven, Precinct 1. This is a substantial amount of money, and I'm just curious, what's the basis for the dollar amount? Was there written estimates obtained, or how did we come up with that number?
Mr. Sanchez.
Just keep talking. How about that one?
Can you hear me now? Thank you. During the process of putting together the 10-year capital plan we start with estimates from contractors. When we move actually closer to coming to town meeting, we do one more round of asking contractors who do work for cities and towns. Remember, there's an added cost, unfortunately, we have to pay when we go out to bid. So that's how we base the contract on. But it's not until we go out to bid that we know the actual amount. But as we do with all the other contracts, this amount can only be used for the roof. Whatever is left over, it just goes back to the town.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Patricia O'Brien, Precinct 2. Hi, John. Are you considering green roof alternatives or anything from a sustainability perspective when you do replace the roof?
Not at this time. It's very difficult to retrofit existing buildings for any type of green infrastructure, so we're not looking at that. We're actually replacing in kind.
Additional? Mr. Wells-Bean.
Hi, Andy Wells-Bean, Precinct 3. On a related note, often the time at roof replacement can be a good time to evaluate installation of solar panels. Has that been evaluated for the library roof?
Again, you actually want to look at solar panels after you do the roof, and then the structure or condition of the roof is not something we're going to be looking at as part of this project. The only thing that we have in the pipeline in the future will be some HVAC work that we like to do at the library as part of a latter town meeting warrant article we have, we're proposing the town to become a green community, and we hope that if that will be the case, we may be able to obtain grant funds for some of that work. But as far as doing those solar panels right now, no, we're not. This is strictly the roof.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Anything additional? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 7-11, the DPW, Police Station Elevator Repair, to be spent under the Selectmen, $50,000. Mr. Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Board of Selectmen voted 5-0-0 to support this.
Ways and Means.
Ways and Means voted 11-0-0.
Thank you. Capital Budget.
Capital Budget voted 7-0-0.
Questions from the body? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 7-12, under the DPW, storage shed has been withdrawn. 7-13, Board of Health Department Administrative Vehicle, to be spent under the Board of Health, $24,245. Ways and Means.
Ways and Means voted 13-0-0 in favor.
Capital Budget. Ernie, could you please stand up so they, the issue we're having with the microphones is that they're turning them on and off, so they need to see that you're going to be using it, so they can turn it on, please.
Capital Budget voted 6-1-0, basically on the basis that the amount of money that is spent on personal vehicle reimbursement use is considerably greater than the cost of that vehicle.
Thank you. Any questions from the body? Yes, sir, Mr. Jean. Mr. Rossi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. If someone could answer this question, we've got a fleet of town hall vehicles behind the town hall. Can one be dispatched to the Board of Health or the Human Services building?
Mr. Sagarino, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Rossi, we looked at that, and based upon the needs of the health department, we felt that at this time, having them share a vehicle wasn't the appropriate way to go. They certainly have enough inspections, and they'll be using this vehicle for emergency flu clinics and things of that nature. So the times that they would be using it are the same times that the town hall vehicles are being used during the day.
Ms. O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Is the Ford Escape a hybrid or an electric vehicle? And could we consider it if it isn't?
Dr. Weiner.
We asked a number of groups in town, and we spoke to the town administrator, and he suggested that vehicle was low cost and would meet our needs.
Anything additional? Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dr. Weiner, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I saw in the backup material a schedule that showed that the cost of this vehicle would be less than the mileage reimbursements of staff using their own vehicles for the last 5 or 10 years. Is that correct?
I think we have to look at it in this way. We have 5 people in our department who do inspections. We have no vehicles whatsoever. within the department, and they're using their private vehicles. So if the question is, this will be used all the time for routine inspections, I'm sure that the one individual who will not be expensing their mileage will not make up for the whole year. It may within 5 years. The issue we need the vehicle is first for emergencies. And we do all kinds of emergency inspections. We called for the fire department, we're called for all kinds of contamination, leaks, fires, emergency drills. There are 5 members of the Board of Health who will not be using it, but there are 5 members who are the professional members within the board who need something, as well as we need transportation. Right now, we have all kinds of programming going on in the town. And in terms of programming, in fact, this Saturday at 10 o'clock, I invite you all to our town health fair. There's so much material that has to be moved for that, for household hazardous waste. We could go on for our emergency drill and flu clinic. We have, in some cases, have to rent a vehicle to bring things from the town. It's just inappropriate to move things in individuals' private vehicle. And last is the inspection. If we have 5 people doing inspections, car goes down, we only have 4 people without at least 1 vehicle available for the Board of Health to be doing inspections. And why it's an all-wheel? We have to do soil analysis. We have to do all kinds of those things in the development. I think a year ago I did a presentation. We're very involved in town development. And last, an interesting story. We had an emergency. Our health director jumped in her personal vehicle, went to the fire or whatever it was, and couldn't even get through because the police department saw someone in a personal vehicle, couldn't even get through the lines until she was able to jump up and wave and someone recognized her. We're the only board and the only group in town that has no vehicle for all of these reasons. I think it's time we have something for emergency and routine use.
And one more question, thank you, Doctor. This vehicle will get quite a bit of usage, right? Like something like 6 trips a day or 30 a week?
Could be, yes, or more.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cormier.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Cormier, Precinct 6. Dr. Weiner, this is kind of one of my pet peeves, not directed towards you in particular, but the cars. One of my pet peeves is the amount of cars that wind up going home with people. Is this car going to be taken by any staff members as far as going home?
Absolutely not. We've already discussed this.
Thank you very much.
Anything additional? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 7-14. From the Recreation Department, Simons Park Tennis and Skate Park lighting, $220,000. Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you. Kevin Sullivan, Chair of the Recreation Commission, and it was a 5-0 in favor.
Thank you. Ways and Means?
Ways and Means voted 11-0-0 in favor.
Thank you. Capital Budget?
Capital Budget voted 6-0-0 on this article.
Thank you. Questions from the body? Yes, ma'am.
Chiffon Wong, Precinct 4. Could you clarify the capital budget ranking for this? Is this ranking number 1 for health, safety, and legal purposes, or rank 2?
From our perspective, it was a safety issue and also one of, to stretch the thing, a matter of convenience to be able to make the facility available for a longer period of time, considering the amount of people who'd like to use that facility.
I was wondering if the Parks and Recreation could provide any type of utilization data. Based upon the way this is written, it seems that the alternative would be you can't have lights to play night at tennis. So it would be to play tennis in the evening. It would be good to understand how many people are actually playing tennis in the evening. I've listened to a lot of discourse tonight regarding really important services for which there's been a lot of typically financial conservatism. So to see $220,000 kind of for something that might be seen as a bit of an indulgence, is important to understand what is nighttime utilization currently looking like, if it is just focused on nighttime utilization and if it's not safety oriented. Thank you.
Brendan.
Mr. Moderator, our goal with this, the lights themselves, they're the only lit tennis courts in town. So in the summer months when Rohannes Park fills up quite quickly after work, and on the weekends, I have reports that it's full by 9 a.m. and stays full throughout the afternoon, and then again picks up in the evening. These are our only lit courts in town. So during our reconstruction of the tennis courts last summer that was approved, or last fall, that was approved last year at town meeting, we were made aware of the condition of the current lights. We feel by coming forward with an article this year and replacing the lights that it is a safety concern. The current lights are metal halide lights. They have Romex cable with metal staples on old wooden telephone poles there. Their usefulness is at the end of its life. We're looking to put in LED lights that will provide up to 50% savings or more, and have a 25-year warranty on the lights, the poles, the whole system, and are covered through the Musco Control Link, which is an online timing system that we can turn on and off the lights. So there is a safety component to it, is the big one that you asked about.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 7:15. For the schools, design and engineering for BHS HVAC to be spent under the school committee, $100,000. Ways and Means.
Ways and Means voted 13-0-0 in favor of this design and engineering money.
Capital Budget. There was a 7-0-0 budget vote from Capital Budget, if you didn't hear it.
Mr. Moderator, the school committee was 5-0.
School Committee 5-0. Questions on this? Ms. Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sherry Ellis, Precinct 3. From my understanding, this $100,000 is going to include the design for the entire HVAC system for the high school, and that if this goes through, then the contract would be for like $12 million to redesign all that. $100,000 seems pretty cheap in that sense if you're getting the design documents for that whole project. I'm just curious.
Mr. Kuna.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We have an estimate that was provided during a master plan that was written 2 years ago that estimates the HVAC and heating system at $11.2 million plus inflation for 2 years. Again, that is an estimate, and since that time that I've been on board, I've had conversations with 4 different contractors, and we see a variance that could be somewhere less than that, and of course somewhere more than that. But we really need to sit down and get an idea as to what we want, put that on a plan so we can get an actual price. So again, Ms. Ellis, when I responded to your email this morning, I did agree that what we're expecting is a design phase out of this engineering request, and then we would have blueprints and/or documents from that that we could then go out to bid afterwards.
Ms. O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Patricia O'Brien, Precinct 2. A question for the district. Have we done building audits and building envelope tests and things to understand the efficiency of the envelope of the building, to do insulation measures before we go ahead and design and engineer a system at a certain capacity that we might not need if we have some retrofitting?
Mr. Kuna?
So we have not done a complete, what you would call an audit. During that master plan, we have looked at insulation of the building, structural integrity of the building. We've looked at the window design, the door replacements, and so forth. So that's all written up as to, you know, what would be our higher percentage of what we need replaced. Like I said, we do not have a complete audit that you're asking for, just on the efficiency of that. No.
Ms. Willard?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sally Willard, Precinct 4. Is the HVAC system at the end of its life? Is that why we're doing this, or is it simply to become more efficient? I have heard that among the school buildings under consideration for replacement, the high school might be one of them. And if we're going to spend $11 million or $12 million designing and replacing the HVAC, it seems kind of silly if we're just going to be replacing the building in the next few years. Thank you.
Mr. Kuna?
Mr. Moderator, so the boilers in this building are original to it. They have been retubed 3 times that I'm aware of. The HVAC system in this building is similar in age, where we've had some parts replaced in recent years. Again, the expectation is that yes, we would save money on the efficiency of the new boilers and so forth, but the real benefit would be is that we would have new air quality systems in place. So right now, we don't have the most reliable heating system. We don't have the most reliable functionality when we get to our classrooms, and we don't have the most modularity when it comes to temperature. As you can see tonight, a little hotter than we would probably like it to be. So.
Dr. Conti?
May I just answer the second part of your question? We've submitted a plan to renovate this building, not replace this building, to the state, the Massachusetts School Building Authority. So again, our intention in the work that we had done in the master planning felt the structural integrity of this building could move forward, but it does need significant renovation moving forward. So we're, again, if we get the prices back and the state supports the renovation, we could potentially include some of these costs for reimbursement like we did at the middle school. But we're not, again, our plans working with the architects are not to tear this building down moving forward.
Anything additional? Mr. Wells-Bean?
Andy Wells-Bean, Precinct 3. I learned a lot recently from the experience of the Lexington school system, where they initially had a design for their new high school, and it came back with a certain size HVAC system. And they went back and looked at the envelope, looked at the efficiency of the building, made some tweaks to it, and were able to dramatically reduce the size of their HVAC system. And I think asking a company to design HVAC systems for this building without looking at the full picture of what we can do to make it really efficient and the envelope really tight means that we might be buying a $12 million HVAC system when we might only need an $8 or a $10 million one. I don't think that we should move forward with asking someone to write up the plans until we've done that investigation.
Yes, sir.
Darrell Interest, Precinct 6. Do you have any data on the repair costs that have been spent over the last 10 years, 5 years, anything like that?
In 2017, we spent $146,000 on retubing 3 boilers. In 2003, we retubed 2 of the boilers and repacked the insulation in one of them for $98,000. And then the last record that I'm aware of goes back to 1999, where it was about $16,000. Besides any normal maintenance where maybe we've had to replace a valve or a pump or something, but the actual boilers themselves, those are the ones that I have. If we're going to talk about HVAC systems as well too, I have some records on that where we've had to replace some pumps. The existing ductwork for the HVAC is original, the computer system's original. For the boiler system, the tube enclosures are original and all the copper is original. It's really just any auxiliary pumps and so forth that have been maintained besides the retubing of the boilers.
Anything additional? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Let's try that one more time. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. It's not debatable. All those in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned. 7:30 on Wednesday.